Joining us now, our Monday NHL insider from the Bob McCown podcast, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, Mr. John Shannon here on Sekeres and Price. How you doing, John?
I am doing great, boys. You?
Very well.
Very well. Let's start with our Bodog poll question, and we'll go from there. Patrik Allvin in the Province newspaper this weekend saying, hey, we don't have superstars, and it was more contextualized than that. We're asking, do the Canucks have a superstar? What says you, John?
No, they don't. They don't. They have some budding superstars, but I think you have to remember where Patrick's coming from, where you have Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby, but this is where, and I think I can say this, but the thin-skinned British Columbians, because I used to be one of them, the thin-skinned British Columbians take everything personally, and Patrik Allvin's not a British Columbian yet. I hope he becomes one soon. I think that's all part and parcel of the price you pay in a hockey crazed market. So, just is Quinn Hughes going to be a superstar? Maybe he might. Elias Pettersson, we thought he was going to be. He's had a buffer year this year that doesn't allow him to be called that yet. There's some potential superstars, but they don't have anybody of the ilk of Crosby or Malkin in Vancouver yet.
Here's the quote in its entirety. I didn't even bat an eyelash when I read it. In fact, I read it and I went, yeah, that's insightful. That's honest. That's fair. We have some good players here in place. I think every single player down there in that room has something to prove. We don't have the superstar. We're not a contending team right now, so every single player has something to prove to us, and that's going to be the mindset moving forward.
Yeah,
absolutely, Pat. I think that's spot on.
So do I.
With this group, there's no one here that to me is tenured enough that you can sit there, rest on their laurels, and say, "Hey, I'm an established NHL superstar, and y'all have to cater to me."
None of these players have scored 30 goals yet.
No, exactly.
Don't you score 30 goals if you're a superstar?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But they have some candidates, as John notes, and we'll see.
Can we be clear that Calder Trophy wins and nominations do not make you a superstar? That just means you're a really good rookie.
Had a really good rookie.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, here's the thing. When you have a franchise as in many ways financially fragile as the Canucks are, and you're trying to rebuild your hockey operations group, you're trying to rebuild your season ticket base, you're trying to rebuild your business. In a market that is volatile. How's that? Is that a fair word? Volatile? In a volatile market, you do tend to watch your words carefully, pick your words, and then every once in a while somebody will say something, and two guys in the office will put their hands up over their head and grasp their ears and say, "Oh my goodness, we said something wrong." But at the same time, I think that there has to be you have to have enough cojones to say, you know what, we believe with what we say, and we're going to turn this around, and we're going to do a solid job in doing it. So I certainly do not have any issues with what Patrik Allvin said about not having superstars, because look where he came from. Quite frankly, just look where he came from.
And I think it's fair and accurate. I think it's accurate. I think it's awesome. In fact, I think the messaging from this administration has been very good. And I will give the most credit and the most accolades to Jim Rutherford, because I think he understood, and I think Jimmy is wired this way a little bit anyways, that what this market needed was somebody plain spoken to sort of let them know what the real is here, what the path forward is going to be, particularly in consideration of those who used to message to the market. And frankly, the messaging for many a year here has been poor. So I sit here and I read all this and I go, I think these guys are onto it. I saw somebody note on Twitter that, good thing Allvin didn't call Miller a superstar, because of course that might have some contractual and leverage ramifications when it gets down to doing a new deal. But, what's your sense of this group, John? Are they at all daunted about messaging to a Canadian market? Do you think they're doing that swimmingly well? What's your assessment here several months in?
I think that might be the biggest learning curve for this group. What I would say is that we all know, particularly two guys, Bruce and Jimmy, being Canadian, have had lots of success in the United States in rather competitive media markets and in good hockey markets, but they have never worked in Canada, albeit they played for the Maple Leafs, but that was at a different time in a different place. But they have never been in the storm or in the eye of the storm in running a Canadian-based NHL team. And I will tell you, and I had this discussion with a few people in the last couple of weeks. It's hard. It's different. It's different than playing it and working in Boston or in Denver or Los Angeles or Washington or Raleigh. When you have a fan base as rabid as the Canucks have, I think it's true for every Canadian city. When you have that rabid fan base, you have to. There's a learning curve for you on how you manage it, and it's relentless, 24/7. You go out for dinner. You're sitting at the table. People are looking at you. You're not going to have any privacy. When you turn on the radio or read social media, you may have said something as innocuous as Allvin said, and you are going to pay the price somehow. And you better have thick skin. You better have thick skin, otherwise you won't last.
Can we or should we cross-reference any of those talking points with the somewhat suspicious silence around the coach's future for this team? Is any of what you just talked about there related to why we haven't heard anything about the option year for Bruce Boudreau or an extension beyond that next year?
He does have his contract next year. But at the same time, you have to wonder, are there options for either side this summer? And I don't know. I mean, nobody will say anything. I think we talked about the Monday after trade deadline, and he was the next guy they have to look after one way or the other. And this is where Rutherford's privacy becomes challenged. Jimmy likes to do things very quietly, very discreetly. Will it surprise me if Bruce gets a contract at some point? No, it wouldn't. But I also think that Jim Rutherford wants to make sure 100% that Bruce Boudreau is his guy in order to make this happen. And perhaps there's a little bit on Bruce's side to say he wants to make sure that he wants to stay in Vancouver too. And,
who's got more reticence, the organization or the coach, do you think, right now?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, here's both Rutherford and Boudreau have lived this life many, many times. They lived by the sword and died by the sword so many times in their careers in management. So you wonder is what's going through both sides' mind to say, okay, remember these guys. We all joked and laughed about these guys for the first time in 50 years are finally working together. Maybe it's not as hunky-dory as we think it should be between the sides. I'm not suggesting I know anything because I don't, but I do believe that the moment the trade deadline passed and there was a belief that Boudreau was supposed to be the guy, that they should be trying to sign the guy. And I don't know why it hasn't happened.
I would think the reticence has to be on the part of management. Like we know Boudreau wants to coach in the NHL, and we know that to the point where he may have sold himself cheaply when he first accepted the job just for this year. And we understand it's a mutual option for next year, but there could be some devil in those details.
Yeah.
Answer me this, John. Do you think?
But I think we also know Bruce. I think we also know Bruce well enough that the one person Bruce has always believed in is himself. He's always believed that he can coach. And what he needed to do without getting, he didn't get the Buffalo job last time around. There were other coaching availabilities that people looked at him and said, no, we're not interested. When the Canuck one came around with the right scenario with Rutherford there, it came around and worked perfectly for both sides. But Bruce has always been confident in his own skin. And so that perhaps Bruce is sitting there saying, well, listen, there's going to be lots of jobs next summer, and I've proved now that I can coach in the league, and let's go do it. Who knows? I mean, I think I think there's a lot of discussion that could happen. But it in a season that has had too many distractions when it comes to player signings, who's moving, who's not moving. I mean, look at all the names that were thrown out there that eventually didn't get moved, whether it was Garland or Miller or Besser. And we should have taken Rutherford at his word, saying, I'm not really trying to blow everything up right now. Perhaps we're in a scenario where we're looking at a similar situation with Boudreau, and they're just taking their time to get it done and doing it at an appropriate time.
I'm just sitting here looking at potential coaching vacancies in the offseason. Some of the teams towards the bottom of the barrel have already made their moves, but you're quite right. There could well be some opportunities that are more fetching to him. Is this where the owner going out and hiring Boudreau before he had Rutherford in the front office in place, sort of backwards?
No.
Is this coming back to bite them here at all?
Don't think so, because I do think that I do think the Rutherford deal was in principle done before the Boudreau deal, and when there were a couple of coaches available, and Francesco and Jim talked about Boudreau. They both agreed that Boudreau would be a good coaching situation. That it was with Jim's full blessing that Francesco got Boudreau signed in Vancouver.
And let's face it, guys,
the other name out there was Claude Julien, right?
Right.
And
my understanding is they didn't want to meet Claude's price tag, and Bruce going for this year and next year for whatever he agreed to.
Which is what I was going to say. When this got signed, guys, we praised it. We said this is a veteran NHL coach who just signed a team-friendly deal that gets you through to the end of the year, where you can reassess at the end of it. Like this was lined up. So the fact that now they can do whatever they want. I mean, this is what they wanted, which is we all thought that if he performed as he has, that he'd be invited back. We just assumed that, and maybe that's not the case.
Or Bruce doesn't want to come back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Either way.
So yeah. No, that's
and he wouldn't be the first to go, boy. He wouldn't be the first to go, boys, there are a lot of managing up in this organization. If he did want to move on, but answer me this, John, because I think there was a reticence to fire Travis. If we go back even further, I think there was a hesitancy to fire Travis Green, in part because I think the patriarch of the Aquilini family said, you just re-signed him. You're a mess. Do you think any of that is coming into play here? That, wait a second, you fired Travis after giving him the extension, 20-some games after giving him an extension, and now we're being asked to pay even more for coaches? Do you think any of that is at play here?
I don't, because I still think that Jim Rutherford is still making the decisions. And was able to negotiate that fact that he was going to make the decisions. But I've never worked for the Aquilinis. I've never met Luigi. I have met Francesco, but I've never met his father. And we know that his father is still the ultimate decision maker. So I can't say that it would surprise me. But right now, my belief is this is Jim Rutherford's team to pick and choose what he sees as important for the future of the franchise.
All right, move on.
Yeah.
Evander Kane and what he is doing in the Alberta capital, where you're moonlighting as a intermission guest, as an analyst. It has been, needless to say, he has once again here jump-started his NHL career. A word or two on Vancouver's Evander Kane and what he has meant to the Oilers as they march towards, they hope, a playoff spot.
Well, this team has always needed a pure sniper alongside of Connor McDavid on his line, and which would allow Leon Draisaitl to run his line, and that's exactly what Kane has done. I think it's 28 points in 31 games. 16 of those are goals. He's been a model citizen in Edmonton as far as I understand. His teammates are saying the right things about what a good guy in the room he's been. The experiment that Kenny Holland, and I was one of those guys who didn't support it at the time because I thought character was too much of a challenge for this guy. Kenny Holland looks like a genius. I mean, you don't, when you talk about 16 goals in 31 games, that's about a 40 goal mark for over an 82 game season. And you're paying $1 million.
And you've already got a 40 goal scorer and a 50 goal scorer.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. And so Kane has fulfilled his part of the bargain. There's no question about it, and played very, very well for Edmonton, and given them some offensive balance. By the way, he's much tougher than a lot of people understand and realize. So that's created a positive for the Oilers, and Connor's happy. If you can keep Connor happy, you're going to do okay.
Mm-hmm. Except he can't play goal.
They may just have to outscore.
And that's one approach. You could choose to do that,
absolutely.
right?
Well, that's is Toronto Edmonton East, or is Edmonton Toronto West? So same thing, really.
Now, Evander Kane is a UFA at the end. Is he played himself into a massive contract at the age of 31? Because he'll be 31 this summer. Is he played himself into a massive contract again?
That is a really good question. Is there enough damaged goods still that says, you know what, we'll give you a 2-year deal for a certain amount of money? And I don't even know what that amount of money is. But is there going to be a team out there that turns a blind eye to everything and says, okay, Evander, we'll give you a 4-year deal? And the sticker shock of that would be very, very interesting to see. Is there going to be one team? Now, we know there's 3 or 4 teams that aren't even going to go into it, San Jose being one. I suspect Buffalo wouldn't either. I don't think Winnipeg would either, any place he's played. But, how much are you going to risk someone who has certainly the need for money, and he has abused the money in past years when he's been on long-term deals. So now the one thing I would say is he has a new agent, Dan Milstein, and Dan Milstein has a tremendous reputation of working with teams and working with his clients. And perhaps that's the best thing that's going for Evander Kane right now. So perhaps this is a new guy. I will tell you, and in the semi-COVID world, you don't get access to players like you did previous. But he's answered every question. He's been very polite. He has played the game very well with the media and in public. And he's a lot smarter, I think, than people realize.
Lastly, John, and look, he was my hockey hero growing up. I wanted to wear number 22 and score goals off the right wing for the New York
First
Islanders.
biography I ever read was his.
Was his? Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
A word or two about Mike Bossy's at home in palliative care in his final battle with lung cancer, one of the game's absolute champions. And you could argue to this day the greatest goal scorer ever, huh?
Greatest pure goal scorer, yeah. I think, when you think 9 50-goal seasons, was passed over by a lot of teams until the Islanders chose him. Was still, even throughout his career, was ravaged with back injuries. Was still able to put up the numbers. He was part of that Islander dynasty that, in many ways, people of our age remember as one of the key cogs in the success of the National Hockey League. And when you think about Mike's plight right now, and we lost Clark Gillies earlier in the last 4 or 5 months, the Islanders have been hit hard. And it's not fair. He's I got to know Mike a little bit. Mike was a gentleman. Mike was well spoken. Mike always believed in himself in public situations, in private situations, and it also tells you that we put lots of guys on pedestals for years and years and years, and health is the great equalizer. And it's not fair, but it's it's sad. And when you think about Guy Lafleur going through similar issues, when our heroes are going through it, it's sometimes a way to measure what we were and what we are as hockey fans or sports fans as they take their struggles public.
Thank you for that, John. Appreciate it. We'll catch up next Monday, my friend.
Sounds good, boys.
John Shannon, everybody, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. If you wanted to say to me today that the early 80s Islanders are the greatest dynasty in National Hockey League history, with due respect to all the Habs dynasties of the 50s, 70s, and the Oilers, you would get no argument. You want to talk about NHL records that will never be broken? Because, of course, we once upon a time talked about all of Gretzky's records never to be broken, and here comes Ovechkin. How about 19 consecutive playoff series victories? 4 cups in a row, then we get to the Stanley Cup final in year 5. There is no way the salary cap and the governors of the league at this stage of the game, who love their parity, would ever see that again. Like, I don't care how great a player you are coming into the NHL, there is absolutely no way you are going to lead your team to 19 consecutive playoff series victories. Like, there are some franchises that do not have 19 playoff series victories,
for sure,
who have been playing for a long, long time.
No, the 19 playoff wins will probably not happen in a row again. But I tell you, Tampa Bay wins this year. Boy, do we have a great storyline.
We have a marvelous story. And next year, and yet they will still be 7 straight playoff series away. Unless you want to count bubble. I certainly don't count anything bubble. Right?
No, we wouldn't count the bubble. Although the Islanders would have played a best of 5 in there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So you could certainly litigate it. You could litigate it.
Well, they got 4 more series wins to go before they're 7 away consecutively. So think of it.
That's the one reason I might want to cheer for the Bolts. The one reason.